From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
How good is the jury? Congratulations to Danica and all of the team. What a spectacular new addition to all of what we do here at Sky News. Let's follow it up with a great show tonight. No sooks, no lefties. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is an opinion show. It's mine. Name's on the door. You'll be okay. Now, tomorrow, petrol's going to be more expensive, but it's already bloody expensive tonight. Just checking before we came on air, the average price for petrol around the country right now, well, $2.19 is currently what you're going to be paying for unleaded. I know it's a little lower for E10 and a lot higher for diesel. Melbourne, $2.19, and in Brisbane, it is $1.99. But you can add more than a cent to all of that tomorrow. And this is way higher than when Anthony Albanese was whinging about $1.79 when he's the opposition leader, saying that petrol prices were surging on his watch. Well, what does he say about $2.19 versus $1.79? And as we know, the Prime Minister, any chance he gets, well, he talks about a problem that we know is the number one issue for Australians.
Now, we are doing something about cost of living.
But while he's doing something about cost of living with very slight tax cuts for the majority of Australians, tomorrow indexation kicks in, which means the price of petrol increases. It will increase because of the tax. Now, I apologise, on Thursday I bounced around a bit between 49.6 cents per litre and per dollar, but let's just focus in on the big number here. I had a few swirling in my head that night. I apologise. But the new tax is now 49.6 cents per litre. Your average Australian tank is somewhere between 50 and 60 litres, so you can do the sums. Now, if you fill up about once a week, it's $1,500 in petrol tax that you are now going to be paying as a result of this government not doing anything to change the price of petrol. Now, they could halve the amount of tax, as previous governments have, or they could delay the tax increase that will take place tomorrow, but they have not and they will not do it. So the reality for Australians who have a normal car and fill up about once a week, $1,500 is how much you give to the federal government. Now, of course, all of this is supposed to go back on road funding. But how many potholes are there, not to mention your street, but on your way to work, school or anywhere else? There seems to be a mismatch here. But surprise, surprise, the government giving with one hand, yet taking with as many others, like an octopus. 7 other hands finding ways to take it from you. So tomorrow, petrol goes up. And it goes up because the federal government chose for it to go up. Now, interestingly, all of this happened on the same day that Chris Bowen was not talking about this issue. Instead, most of the media, who probably didn't report the petrol's going up tomorrow, thanks to tax, they all would have got very excited today that old Casanova Bowen, dressed in black, because, you know, he's a cool kid. You know, he's like the Johnny Cash of Australian Parliament. Please. Well, they're introducing new fuel standards, which means any new car from halfway through this year, but definitely the start of next year and beyond, will have to meet higher fuel efficiency standards. Now, this means that certain cars will either not be allowed to come in or you'll have to fiddle with parts of the engine for that to end up being the case. But remember, this government just wants to get as many people to electric vehicles as possible, which is why they've introduced luxury car tax on hybrids. Now, of course, the extreme majority of cars on the road are not going to be new cars. They're going to be some form of used car. And at this stage, no plans to do anything about those fuel efficiencies, but about the cars that will be coming into the country. And what is the spin that Chris Bowen is putting on a plan that, even if it happens, does not kick in until the 1st of July and doesn't get serious until the 1st of January next year? Well, he says you'll save this much.
The new vehicle efficiency standard is simply this, requiring car manufacturers to meet certain standards on grams per kilometre of fuel used. They can do that across their fleet, and we will require them to improve gradually but clearly over time the quality of vehicles they send to Australia when it comes to fuel efficiency.
Now, the claim in the media spin was that all of this will save you $1,000 a year when it comes to how many times you have to go to the petrol pump. But there's a little kink in all of this, isn't there? Supposedly, it's about making sure that your fuel goes for longer because of the fuel efficiency standards. Well, if so, why would they increase taxes on hybrid cars? Because they, of course, extend the fuel life of your car. They now turn around and say petrol savings of $1,000, but those don't kick in until a year after January the 1st, 2025. So the best case scenario is if you buy a brand new car January the 1st next year, a full year later, you'll apparently be $1,000 better off. But for the millions of other cars that are on the road from tomorrow, fuel taxes go up, and the total that you will be spending on fuel is 49 cents per litre. Almost said it again. Per litre, meaning $1,500 a year. You see how they say something, but they do something else? That's why I always say, ignore what they say, watch what they do, which is why we're focused on this each and every time. And reminder, that $1,500 a year that you spend on federal petrol tax, the bloke who supposedly is doing something about cost of living but won't do anything about the increase that he has introduced to fuel taxation, well, what's he giving back to low to middle income workers? Well, you know it by now. If it's $45,000, it's $15 a week. $60,000, $22 a week. $80,000, $32 a week, and more than $100,000, $41 a week. So let's imagine let's say, the $22 a week better off. You're now turning around and having to spend $2.20 from tomorrow morning per litre on fuel. It's all hot air, it's all BS, but the media is doing their best to try to pretend that the same people who caused the problem are solving the problem, when we know it's not true. Now, when it comes to trust in the Prime Minister, we know it ain't great. There will be a news poll later tonight. We'll find out how wider people feel about the tax changes. But when the Prime Minister, 11 days after breaking his promise, is still being asked about broken promises, it's not going very well.
Why didn't you take this package to the election? You yourself were saying before the election, this was from your campaign launch speech, this is the worst inflation rate in 2 decades. You said families are struggling, worried about the future. Why didn't you want to give them more at the time? Why were you so wedded to the higher end tax cuts? Is your word still your bond?
The best the Prime Minister has for the home game, that is, an interview on the ABC.
But I'm an honest person.
But will you be less categorical in promises?
I'm an honest person.
OK. You can say your word is your bond, but when you break the promise, your word is not your bond. You can say you're an honest person, but then when you turn around and say cost of living is the only thing I care about, but under your government, petrol taxes go up this week and you've increased taxes on hybrid cars as a way of people trying to not buy as much petrol because, as we've shown you, it's well and truly almost $2.20 a litre. People may not believe you. Now, you can say it as much as you want, and the press gallery backers can back you as much as you want. But I know that people have a very finely tuned BS detector, and it is going off louder and harder every time this bloke opens his mouth. But when he was pressed particularly about, well, hang on, if you're going to make a big change like this, why not back yourself in and take it to an election? Well, he says he doesn't need to take it to an election because he went to a far tougher place than the Australian people.
I've been really upfront, David.
You have. That's
one of the things that I have done is to go to the National Press Club and say, we have changed our position. Why have we done that? Because we've listened to people, and particularly low and middle income Australians are under pressure, under financial pressure. And what you can't do, what I can't do as Prime Minister of Australia, is to wring my hands and say, if only there was something I could do about it.
Like taking $1,500 off 10 million workers, as you did in the budget last year. Like not cutting petrol taxes through all of the inflation problems of the beginning of this year. Or not increasing petrol taxes. Oh, but he went to the National Press Club. Oh, what a frightening experience for a Labor politician. Oh, hello, I represent The Guardian. Oh, this is going to be tough. Hello, I represent the ABC. Oh, how will I get through this? Hello, it's old mate from the Sydney Morning Herald. Whoa, heaven forfend. Now, of course, when you want to make serious changes to tax policy that will actually change people's lives and the financial structure of the country, you do go to an election. Now, because this doesn't actually change anyone's life, instead it's about trying to save his political hide going into the Dunkley by-election and then, presumably, if they win it, a federal election later this year, let's compare and contrast Prime Ministers. Of course, John Howard, who had a thumping majority and could have introduced a GST any time he wanted to, but instead he decided to take it to the people in an early election about a year earlier than he needed to have one. You see, he was elected in 1996. They didn't need one until 1999, but he went in 1998. The Australian people ended up returning them with a reduced majority, but they endorsed the policy change. And speaking of politicians in 1998...
You can trim the eyebrows, you can cap the teeth, you can cut the hair, you can put on different glasses, you can give him a used milk facial for all I care, but to paraphrase a gritty Australian saying, same stuff, different bucket.
Couldn't have said it better myself about you, Albo. Now, tomorrow, Federal Parliament will be returning. It will return, and no doubt, inevitably, the front and centre debate is all going to be about, this week, the tax cuts, the broken promises and all the rest of it. Now, there are a lot of people who have desperately been trying to say, well, what are the Libs doing? What are the Libs doing? When, of course, the government has a clear path through the Parliament. It just needs the Greens, which they always get. It's Pocock, which they always get. It's Lambie, which they always get. But the Prime Minister says there'll be no horse trading whatsoever, yet none of these people are going to stand in the way of a tax cut. And in fact, we can take the mystery out of what the Liberal Party is going to do, because the alternative Prime Minister, Peter Dutton, is following exactly the right path, which is vote for a damn tax cut. Just say you're going to fight bracket creep into the future.
Your own electorate is among those who are going to benefit greatly from these changes to the tax cuts, some 85% of them. You don't want to take money away from them, do you?
And we're not going to. I've been very clear.
So you're not going to stand in the way of these changes as a party?
I've been very clear that the Liberal Party is the party of lower taxes. We always have been. We always will be.
So they're going to vote for it, right? Which means Labor and Liberal get together. This thing could be passed by tomorrow afternoon, by Wednesday afternoon. Oh, no. You see, the plan here is to create a wedge issue for the Liberal Party, because the bloke who broke the promise, well, he's already gone to the people at the National Press Club, and he thinks that all of this is somehow a bad look for Peter Dutton. But the Liberal Party will end up backing these things in. Why? Because, as the alternative Prime Minister has said, they'll always vote for a tax cut, and they should always vote for a tax cut. And they will always vote for a tax cut, even if it's a tax cut that's not done the way they want it to be done. But the expectation is that we move from the Prime Minister and why did you break your promise? Are you a man of your word? You know, the usual game that the Canberra Columbos play. And look at how the media has instantly turned it into a problem for Peter Dutton.
Coalition, first they said that they didn't know what it was, but they were against it, they'd fight it. Then Susan Ley, when asked would it be repealed, said absolutely. Peter Dutton and David Littleproud is saying that they want higher taxes for 12 million Australians.
This shows how diabolically out of touch the Liberals and Nationals are with Middle Australia.
They should vote for it. I want them to vote for it. Everyone, no matter where they sit in the Parliament, should vote for it.
Yawn. But again, that's the echo that you hear throughout the media, because, as you know, most of the people who are in and around the 24/7 conversation of politics, well, they like the idea that this government is different than the last government. They've got a better relationship with them. They're even on the inside. Hello, Murpharoo. But the reality is that they can spin as much as they like. Those of us on the outside, in the normal world, people like yourself, can see what's going on here. And there'll be polls that'll be pro and polls that are against, but you and I both know, generally speaking, what happens when politicians break a promise, and certainly break one of this size. But again, here are some of the examples about how the media is making it all about Peter Dutton. Albo's broken promise is Peter Dutton's problem, you see. Because remember, the central philosophy, the idea of how they think they're going to hold on to power, is that they think that they can do to Peter Dutton what Joe Biden did to Donald Trump. Just make it all about them, and even though they can't tell you that life got better under their watch, they'll turn around and say, but look what will happen with him. He's terrible. He's a threat to democracy. In The Guardian, if Peter Dutton's opposition are true defenders of the working class, well, of course they must back it in. There was this hilarious cartoon in the Channel 9 newspapers where apparently it's all backfiring on Peter Dutton. Ugh. But they're going to back it. They're going to pass it, as they should. Prime Minister's out there saying that, oh, well, this hopefully will be passed by Easter. It could be passed by this week. It should be passed by this week if both sides agree on it. If it doesn't pass this week, it's because the government is playing games, trying to extend the fight for as long as possible, even though there's not a fight, because in the end, the Liberal Party is always going to vote for lower taxes. Now, the question will be whether they're going to fight for the 37-cent bracket creep or get rid of it altogether. We'll all learn about that, all right? But I want to take you back into the Wayback Machine to show you just the double standards about how the media treat the opposition when it comes to tax policy. Let's go back to the budget. May 9 in 2018. Scott Morrison is the Treasurer and he announces Stage 1, Stage 2 and Stage 3 of these tax cuts. Among the other features that were reported that night was it was a plan to scrap middle tax bracket. It was on the 19th of June when the Labor Party turned around and said that they would block the policy. In fact, for months and months and months and months, that was their position, until, after failing to get the numbers in the Senate, they voted to pass said tax cuts on the 4th of July 2019. Now, if you're any good at maths, and you'll probably be better than me, the time it took for Labor to back the original tax cuts was 422 days, or 13 months and 26 days. The time it has taken for the time since Albo formally broke his promise, and now the Libs are on board and they're going to vote for a tax cut, 11 days. 11 days. So the Labor Party can drag its heels and say, oh, we're going to vote against this and we're going to change the upper stage 3. That can go on for 422 days. That can go on for 422 days or 13 months. Oh, but the problem is Peter Dutton's problem. And he's already turned around and said within, 10, 11 days? Yeah, sure, we'll vote for it. We don't love the idea about what you're doing with the upper, but we'll vote for it. He said it. That's what's going to happen. That'll be the party room meeting and that's what they'll do, which means it could pass this week. But if it doesn't pass this week, it's because the government thinks they're on the winner and they'll try and stretch it out till Easter. And the media will turn around and cheer them along. Including, by the way, the chief political correspondent for the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. His name is David Crowe. And guess what he was doing in 2018? Writing for the same newspaper when the Labor Party was dragging its heels before it eventually agreed to a policy for 422 days. I've noticed he has said nothing about this being a slightly different standard than the one that he and the rest of the gallery is trying to apply to the Liberal Party over 11 days. But shh, nothing to see here, right? Now, little change to the way that interest rates are going to work from now on, still set by the Reserve Bank, but as we know, the Reserve Bank, which used to meet every single month, first Tuesday of the month, which means Melbourne Cup Day, all the rest of it, well now, it's only going to be meeting 8 times in a year, which means the chances of bigger ups or hopefully bigger downs, well, they become more likely. But as we know, despite the fact that the government was doing nothing to rein in its own budget, nothing to deal with cost of living, they, of course, spent the entirety of the rates going up, the Albo dozen, the ones that they said were the end of the economy when it was 1 under the previous government. There's now been the full 13 that have happened on Labor's watch. Well, they've turned around and they were, of course, having a go at Philip Lowe. He was the former boss of the Reserve Bank. Never have I seen a public servant being bashed up verbally as he was, because he was the bloke who had to deliver the bad news of the rates going up. So they decided to sack him and they hired his deputy, Michelle Bullock, handpicked by the government. Well, guess what she did at her second meeting of the time she was in charge of the bank? She, of course, increased interest rates because inflation was continuing to be a problem in Australia. That's why they put it up by 25 basis points. And remember, the whole point of the Reserve Bank and the target of the Reserve Bank is that they want inflation to be between 2 and 3%. Not 3.5%, not 3/4, not 4.1. They want it between 2 and 3%. And they will keep the foot on the brake, not the accelerator, the brake, until they get that result. Well, currently, of course, inflation is what? The best part of 4.1%? So even though that's lower than it has been for the past couple of years, good, it still means things are going up. But still, I think you can do numbers as well. Is 4.1, 2 or 3%? No. So what is the Reserve Bank going to do? Are they just going to keep things as tight as they are right now, where, according to December, 109,000 people lost their full-time job? Are they going to turn around and look at the retail sales figures that say, what, $800 million less was spent in our shops in December last year than the year before? Or, as many people would suggest, including state premiers, Labor people and all the rest of it, because they want the narrative to start to be, oh, the government's fixed the inflation problem with $15 a week tax cuts, and $1,500 in petrol taxes. Well, what will happen here? The cheer is for the Reserve Bank to cut the rates, but the likelihood is that that will not be happening either this month or when they meet again towards May. Now, I hope that's wrong. I, of course, as a mortgage holder, would like to be paying a far lower mortgage rate than we are currently, and it won't be anything to do with the government. It will, of course, only be because of what's happened when it came to interest rates. But interestingly here, I want to show you how these meetings are going to work. You see, it used to be first Tuesday every month, the afternoon, they take a couple of hours, they look around the room. It's not just the Reserve Bank governor, by the way, it's everyone on the board. And then they turned around and they banged out the press release at 2:30. Well, now it's going to change. How's this? The Reserve Bank will now be meeting for 2 half days instead of the half day just on the Tuesday. The Monday will involve presentations from the Reserve Bank staff about the state of the economy and the markets, along with the outlook, starting at 2 p.m. and finishing at about 5:30. Whew, they're burning the midnight oil. The board will spend about 3.5 hours discussing the issues, about twice as much as they previously did. The board will then reconvene at 9 a.m. on Tuesday to consider the policy decision. Ms Bullock said that there will be a benefit to members being able to reflect overnight, and just hear all those messages that get sent to them via the 6 p.m. news. During the 4-hour meeting on Tuesday, members will also finesse the post-meeting communication, and then she'll go out and announce it to the public. But how are people feeling about what's going to happen? Well, according to the Herald Sun, Reserve Bank governors are not ready to cut rates just yet. And in fact, some suggestions are that it won't be being cut for some period of time. Remember, the ANZ Bank said they were going to have kind of rates around this level, so maybe a little down, maybe a little up, but basically around this level for the next 5 years. So Albo's $15 tax cut, not going to be the solution to cost of living when people are having to find, as we've shown you before, somewhere between $15,000 and $29,000 extra a year to pay off their house. Now, there's a big development that is happening behind the scenes in the diplomacy in and around ending the most recent issues between Israel and Hamas. Now, it is to do with maybe giving into one of the central demands of Hamas. Now, that is that Palestine would be officially recognised as its own country. Now, technically, it's part of the UN right now, but it's not its own country. Now, if it became its own country, it would have greater abilities to police its own territory, to be able to take care of its own airspace. Yes, they would be able to have their own military if they wanted to. They would also have to have the responsibility of making sure that all of the utilities are not something that's lent on out of Israel, but instead they'll have to make it all in their own part of the world. Now, Israel has vehemently argued against this for a long period of time and a whole bunch of reasons, and whether making Palestine a country is just Gaza or it's Gaza and the West Bank, greater minds than I will work out if they ever do. But the reason I say all of this is because for the first time in a very long time, the United States, the UK and Australia are all saying that they may well end up recognising Gaza and Palestine as its own country, as a way of trying to bring to an end the conflicts that are taking place right now. Now, obviously, would that mean that that country would keep electing Hamas as its government? Who knows? Would Hamas literally be in charge of the defence force? Would they be able to make agreements with places like Iran more formally? I don't know. But the US is looking at doing it. The UK is looking at doing it. And this former Prime Minister, now Foreign Secretary, is openly talking about doing it regardless of whether Israel likes it or not.
A secure Israel within its borders and a secure and stable Palestine within its borders. That's long been our position. And of course, as part of that, Britain, along with other countries, would recognise Palestine as a country and recognise Palestine at the United Nations.
Now, as I say, they're already recognised since 2012 in the United Nations, but not recognised as a country in its own right. They have observer status, and the left in Australia has long demanded that Australia does this. In fact, the Victorian Labor Party just last year said that there needed to be a recognition of Palestine, and I think that was around the middle of the year, so it was before the whole October the 7th stuff. Now, regardless of whether you think this should or shouldn't happen, let me tell you why it might happen. Because Joe Biden wants to keep his job. You see, this issue, again, whether you like it or not, is trending very much Palestine's way with younger voters in the United States who would have been assumed to vote for Biden. But they have openly said, unless something like this happens, they won't vote for Biden to be president. So you are literally looking at a scenario now where, for Biden's very own political survival as president of the United States, they may well end up changing the way that parts of the world are defined, all for the American election. Again, like it, don't like it, argue for it, vote against it. But if there is any change, it's because Joe Biden needs and wants to save his backside. No Sooks, No Lefties is the promise tonight. We will deliver on that right after this break here on Paul Murray Live with none other than the wonderful Nicole Flint here each and every Sunday, and the man who'd like to be part of the Queensland Parliament, representing One Nation, our mate James Ashby. Both joined us straight after the break. Let's get into it. Told you, no Sooks, No Lefties tonight. That's your reward for watching us on a Sunday. Do appreciate it. Remember, you can always send me an email, paul@skynews.com.au, and get all of the highlights of what we do at skynews.com.au. Now, 2 weeks from tonight, the first of our Towns for the year begins. Thanks to the wonderful people of Harvey Norman. We will be in Townsville. If you would like to join us in Townsville in a couple of weeks' time, please send me the email. It is paul@skynews.com.au. Sorry, Our Town. Wake up, Paul. Our Town at skynews.com.au. It's a couple of Sundays' time. If you would like to join us, please come to this beautiful part of Australia. Yes, we'll talk about some of the recent issues that they've been having, but we will celebrate the fact that we are there on All Stars weekend. So it's going to be huge. Middle of Feb, Our Town at skynews.com.au. Let's get into No Sooks, No Lefties. And I tell you what, one of us is very committed to a double badge tonight. None other than the lovely Nicole Flint, former federal MP, and the wonderful James Ashby, who is trying to get a seat in the Queensland Parliament for One Nation. The seat is called Keppel. Hello to you both. I love the double badge. That is commitment, Nicole. You're all in.
I am all in, Paul, and the reason that I'm wearing the double badge is that I had one Australia-Israel badge on Thursday night when I appeared on our very good friend Peter Credlin's show. And the trolling that I was subjected to on Twitter was next level. And so I doubled down. I added another badge. But, Paul, I'm not even Jewish. I'm just doing it because I am appalled at the atrocities, as we all are, the atrocities Hamas inflicted on Israel on October 7 last year, and the disgraceful reaction from so many in Australia with the protests immediately afterwards, seeming to celebrate what Hamas had done. But Paul, the trolling that went on after I appeared on Thursday night was just so next level. I really, really feel for Jewish community in Australia, because they must be suffering so much worse than I am. And Caroline Marcus was dragged into this as well. It is disgraceful. It is disgusting. I won't stand for it. And I stand with Israel. I stand with our wonderful Jewish community here in Australia. And this sort of bullying and anti-Semitism has to stop.
Well, I just love that all of, look, again, I don't care if haters watch the show. I mean, firstly, they're going to learn something. Secondly, it all counts for ratings. So I appreciate that the haters are here, ready to run off to the umpire. Oh, did you see what they said? Did you see what they were wearing? OK, let's get the petrol tax. James, I mentioned this on Thursday night. I go back again tonight. Tomorrow, petrol tax goes up by 1 and a bit cents. Oh, 1 and a bit cents, who cares? Reality, total amount? As we know, it's more than $1,500. This is on the same time these people are saying, oh, we care about cost of living. We're giving people on $45,000, $15 a week of their own money. Well, guess where it's going? Straight to petrol tax in this country.
Yeah, that's it. A lot of people don't realise that the Prime Minister recalled
the Labor cabinet and every single MP 2 weeks ahead of this parliament to talk about ways in which he can save the ordinary Australian on cost of living. Why wasn't this raised? Why wasn't this? Why wasn't a plan put forward to say, listen, we're going to put this on ice. We're not going to do this. But instead, no. That was all another lie. And again, Paul, this tax will increase again come August. That's 2 whacks that occurred to every single person with a car across this country, February the 5th, tomorrow, and again on August the 5th. So this bloke's got no idea on how to reduce cost of living.
Well, but also it's this thing, Nicole, where they've all sat around, they've smarty pants this, and the reality is it's not about doing anything for the economy. Instead, it's about trying to do something for their political fortunes. As soon as Newspoll drops, I think in the next few minutes we'll be able to tell you whether that has worked or not. But I just think Australians see through it. I think that when the tax cuts are as financially insignificant as $15 a week, and all the lovies will turn around and say, "Well, you know how far $15 can go." Yes, I do, but let's not pretend that $15 is going to change anyone's life demonstrably, right? Not when petrol goes up, all the other things go up, power bills go up. So you can take that debating point and do it on the drum if it still existed. But the point here, Nicole, is that, again, we care about cost of living. We've done everything we possibly can to pull on every possible lever. No, they haven't. They've just come up with a political solution that the gallery has gone around and turned into an issue for Peter Dutton after 11 days when you were in the parliament. Short and buggerised around on tax for, 13 months?
Precisely, Paul. And that $15 a week will be eaten up by people's petrol bills. And it was my government, when I was in Parliament, that actually halved the excise tax for 6 months, gave everyone relief. So why on earth isn't Labor doing that again? And remember, it was the Labor government under Prime Minister Albanese who declined to extend the halving of the excise. So why on earth isn't Labor doing that again? Because people have no choice but to put petrol in their cars, especially, for example, if you're a tradie or someone who needs to travel for work every day, go to different sites every day. You can't just jump on a train or a bus to get to most work sites. You actually need to have your own car. And it will be hurting people who are on lower incomes the most. It would be hurting apprentices. It's just, shift workers, nurses, everyone. Most people rely on a car. And this is before we even... So, fuel prices still extremely high. When Albo was complaining about them when he was opposition leader, he's done nothing. They've gone up under him. Yep, that's right. They're now still sitting at about $2. And as we know, as you have pointed out so well, Paul, 50 cents of that is tax that's going straight to the government. What about when they put this potential ban in on letting people decide which cars they can buy? So cars, brands like Ford, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Labor are looking at imposing a cap on emissions from those brands, which will mean less choice for consumers. It will mean people like tradies or farmers, people who need big vehicles that are four-wheel drive, that are capable of carrying a lot of load and also traversing different terrain, are going to have very limited choice. And then, OK, so let's say they get rid of these sorts of vehicles and try and push us all onto electric vehicles. Well, we'll be paying record high power prices because of their crazy renewables plan. Yeah, so taxpayers are the ones who are hurting.
Yeah, again, and this again, James, is the madness, right? Which is they're not letting the market deciding, they're pushing the market, particularly the decision on hybrid, right? Now, this is, again, more people bought a hybrid last year than bought an electric car as their transition car to maybe going to electric eventually. Now, I was mentioning before about Newspoll. I now have that Newspoll. It shows that there is no change in the two-party preferred. In fact, it still remains 52-48 in favour of the government. However, there has been a change in the primary vote, which again is the indication about, well, would they be able to make their own majority? Now, Labor has got 34%. The Coalition 36%, Greens down, that goes to Labor, 12%, One Nation up to 7%, and Other is now sitting at 11%. On the all-important question of tax cuts, 62% of people say that Labor did the right decision by changing the stage 3, 29% say no, but If you look at this here, James, I get a feeling that it's take the money and run, because there's no change in the personal popularity of the Prime Minister, still has a negative overall opinion of his leadership, which you would think would have been turned by the decision that 69% apparently agreed with.
Well, see, I've got a real problem with this, and the Coalition have the biggest problem, because with all the lies that have been told by Labor, and with all of these significant cost changes, the shift in which we're all burdened with, whether it be on electricity prices or whether it be on increase to excise on fuels, alcohol, cigarettes, everything else that's happening, the Coalition haven't made any moves to improve their vote. This is a government that will get a second term at this current rate, because they've got a fallback position with the Teals, the Greens, and God knows who else in the lower house. This is the problem that Peter Dutton faces. We either need to see the real Peter Dutton, and he's got to step out of this comfort zone that he's currently sitting in. I like Peter, and I've had the fortune to spend a bit of time with the bloke, so I actually think he's a decent fella, unlike the current Prime Minister that we've got. But more of this country need to know what Peter Dutton stands for, and he's got to take the challenge up to this government instead of just laying down and allowing them to walk all over him. Where is Peter Dutton in this argument over the broken promise on taxes? And I just have to say, you're going to end up with a second term of this lousy, lying government unless we see some real action out of this Coalition. That's the sad part, Peter, Paul. And look, going back to that issue when it comes to excise tax, yeah, look, I wouldn't mind paying a bit more for excise tax if that money was actually being quarantined for better roads in this country. It's not. It's going to consolidated revenue.
Correct.
And, you know, when they're giving incentives for electric vehicles to be on our roads, they're not paying excise tax. So they're actually not paying towards using the road network in the first place. We've got some real issues at this present moment with this current government.
So, Nicole, let's talk about part of what James said about how Peter Dutton presents himself, how he should present himself. I think that he's going to land in the right place, which is, look, we always back a tax cut, we'll back this thing, and it should get through the parliaments faster rather than later. But there's a whole bunch of other issues that we've talked about here, from the excise to the hybrid to all the different issues that came out over summer that we've discussed. There's plenty of other rich pickings there that no doubt he'll get into in question time. Dunkley's coming up, but you see the media turn around and they've basically made Peter Dutton the loser out of the Prime Minister's broken promise.
Look, as anyone who's involved in politics always says, Paul, the only poll that matters is the one on election day. 52-48 is very close. Peter Dutton has demonstrated fantastic leadership on a range of things. And let's just go back to the Voice campaign, shall we?
Oh, yeah.
He had a huge win. He has demonstrated that he has the courage of his convictions. He has convictions. And I know that we will see a raft of policies released by the opposition and opposition leader Peter Dutton in the lead up to the next federal election when the time is right. At the moment, quite rightly, they are not going to, it sounds like the opposition are not minded to block tax cuts. We need to help people with cost of living relief as much as we can. However, I do sincerely hope that we will see the Coalition sticking to our other tax cuts and proper reform of the tax system, which is well overdue, which is what was proposed with the Stage 3 tax cuts. And I think that that will win them a lot of votes at the next election. One of the key issues when we're talking about cost of living is power prices and power reliability. Now, if the Coalition goes down the nuclear path, which I hope they will, they have been brave enough to have the debate. There's huge support for nuclear out in the community because people know that that is the way to have reliable, stable baseload power that also helps the climate. So there's a lot of time to run until this next federal election, and we now have, and I'm sure we will see this in the Coalition's campaign, we have the liar in the lodge. Anthony Albanese lied to the Australian people about these tax cuts, and the power of individual MPs, senators, paired senators in Liberal seats and seats that we need to win is that they can go direct to voters through social media, through good communications, to let them know that they cannot trust Anthony Albanese.
All right, quick
You're going to have to do better than that, Nicole. Liar in the lodge hasn't worked in the last 2 weeks. What do you think it's going to do? We could go to an early election as soon as August. And you can't leave it till 6 weeks out once they make that announcement to start delivering policy and argument against this government. It's got to be now. Stop with this delay. Let's reveal what the coalition truly stand for, because right now I'm not seeing anything.
All right. Now, I've got to get to your bold predictions for the week ahead in a moment, but apparently bosses will end up getting fined if they communicate with their workers outside of working hours. This is all part of what's making its way through the Senate right now. Now, Nicole, as always, you know how this legislation works, right? Which is this will be one sliver of 28 pages of changes that are a lot more unpopular than the boss can't send me a text in the middle of the night. Is it important that the people discussing this legislation in the next few days don't get lost on the little shiny objects like that and talk about the reality of what these workplace changes are?
Well, Paul, this particular issue is hugely concerning, and yes, it may not be the worst of what we're going to see from Labor's next tranche of IR changes, but what Labor are trying to do is drive a wedge between employers and employees, and particularly in the small business sector, which is 97% of businesses in Australia have under 20 employees. They are small businesses. This is just another way that Labor is trying to turn employees against employers who are usually family-owned businesses. They passed some horrendous changes before Christmas, Paul, which we have not seen kick in yet. And when James is saying, you know, what's the coalition standing for, we certainly don't stand for the reunionisation of Australian workplaces, which is precisely what Labor passed at the end of last year. I am certain that businesses have not, especially our small businesses who are so busy in the lead up to Christmas and over summer, you know, working hard to earn money, they do not, I think, fully understand yet how damaging Labor's IR changes are going to be and how dangerous. And when they start to understand, I think we're going to see the coalition in a very good position to put strong workplace relations changes to the electorate at this next election, because we cannot have businesses held hostage by unions and having union delegates wander in and tell businesses how to run their business, and also, again, turning employees against employers. Family businesses have great relationships with their employees. If they don't, they cannot run their business.
Well, wouldn't it be fascinating if you can get a fine for asking somebody while they're on their day off, hey, can you work Tuesday because Michelle can't come in? Be fascinating to see. But anyway, all right, let's give me 30-second versions here. Prediction for the week ahead, James, what's definitely happening?
Well, there's a protest happening outside Parliament House on Tuesday, which is to say a big, we don't want these windmills, these wind turbines on our properties. We're talking largely the farmers here. There will be a protest on Tuesday. I hope everybody gets along to it. My prediction is, though, it's going to get hijacked by the left and the Greenies. Watch out, Parliament House. I reckon there'll be some conflict out the front that day. You
desperately wanted to say Francis Urquhart, but you moved past it. I appreciate that. All right, Nicole, your bold prediction?
Well, funnily enough, it was on the same topic. James and I are on a bit of a unity ticket here.
Good.
But my bold prediction is we will not see a single Greens or Labor MP or Senator turn up at this rally to stand up for farmers, but also stand up for our fishermen, because these offshore wind farms are going to destroy beautiful parts of our ocean that are so important to family fishing businesses. And I bet that Labor and the Greens won't have the guts to go and look our farmers, our fishermen, our rural and our coastal communities in the eye and say, we're listening to you and we will not let this environmental destruction go ahead.
Good stuff. Well, turn up in big numbers, and if the lefties get in your face, don't react, because that's kind of the game they want. Thank you, guys. Do appreciate it. We'll talk again very soon. None other than the great Andrew Bogut joins us straight after the break. Let's talk about wokeness in sport and plenty of other things before we're done. Don't forget, a couple of weeks' time, Townsville is the location for Our Town. Send us an email, ourtown@skynews.com.au. Time to talk sport now with none other than the great Andrew Bogut, represented his country in basketball, but so much more than that. You can hear his podcast, the Rogues Bogues podcast. How are you, great man?
Go on yourself.
Good, but I've got to say, why are people going silly about Taylor Swift being a psyop when it comes to her boyfriend endorsing Biden? Look, she endorsed Biden at the last election. Would they really need to rig the NFL for her to be able to do it again 4 years later?
I mean, whatever side of politics people are voting, you'd hope they're not looking towards a pop singer or an athlete or whoever. I mean, we're at a point in society where everyday, not only Americans, Australians, whoever, when they're going to polls for different elections in their respective countries, have bigger issues than a song or an athlete or a celebrity or a producer, cost of living, XYZ, list goes on. I would hope they look at those things before they look at who can sing and who can't and play football.
But also, I'm so with you, right? But it's like, I mean, you've read, so you've had a friend, no doubt, tell you on this day, and then, okay, I get it, all right? We've gone through a couple of years where, big systems have failed us and big people that were supposed to be on our side absolutely screwed us over. But I'm sorry, when I hear this one, I just go, shush, please shush. You're making yourself seem really silly thinking that this is what they waste their time on, right? I get it. The powers that be, the machine has got lots of ways to get what it wants, but I don't reckon it's got any hand in this whatsoever.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I mean, the conspiracy theories can go on and on and on and on both sides of politics. You hear the most extreme stuff, and I've fallen victim to things that were conspiracy theories in the past. I'm not afraid to say it and put my hand up and said I made a mistake. But that's where it is. But yeah, I think both sides of politics. I think especially Democrats with everything going on with Joe Biden being asleep at the wheel and cost of living going through the roof. We know all about all that. The handling of the border. I think they need as much celebrity endorsement as they can get.
Could you explain to us what the heck is the NBA's 65-game rule and how does it affect athletes? Because there's a bloke who basically was getting in trouble from his fans for not wanting to play a game because he was trying to take care of his own health.
Yeah, look, this has been going on for about 4 or 5 years. The term is load management. So with 82 regular season games in the NBA, what teams are doing is they're strategically resting guys all throughout the season. So they say, I was even told toward the end of my career a couple of times, coach come up to you and say, hey, we're resting you tomorrow. I'm like, hey, I have no injury. Doesn't matter. We're resting you for the long haul. What that had then done is frustrated fans that are paying big money. A lot of fans, especially international fans that travel to the US, they might book a trip and book it around seeing LeBron James. And then all of a sudden, that trip's 4 months away. You get there, he rests that night. So there's a lot of backlash towards fans paying big money, right? So now what's happened is the NBA's listened to fans, listened to people and said, look, if you're eligible for NBA awards, MVP, All Defensive Team, all NBA teams, which generally are tied to big bonuses and contracts. If you make the All NBA first team, you might get an extra couple of million. You need to play a minimum of 65 games to be eligible for those contracts. So therefore, it's putting pressure on those players to not let their teams rest them. So now the flip side's happened. Joel Embiid, who I assume you're talking about, the Philadelphia 76ers, has played through a few injuries because he wants to be eligible, and now looks like he's got a knee injury where he might miss the rest of the season. But just for the record, I'm for the 65 games. I think it's dismal to have people, spend hard-earned money to strategically buy one game that they can afford a year to see that superstar player, and they get there, and it's not the player's fault. Because a lot of times it's the team saying, "We don't want you to play, we want you to rest," and they go to the game, they don't see that player, they wasted $600-700 to get good seats, and you feel bad for the fans. So I'm all for the rule, and I think the athletes just need to suck it up.
Sadly, I'm somebody who, every time I buy a basketball ticket for the NBA, it's still for the New York Knicks. And the result's never the one that I wanted, but it's still fun to go to MSG. Thank you, mate. We'll talk again very soon. Andrew Bogut, of course, there. Rogues Bogues is his podcast. Quick break. Back with more, a special moment of movie sport we need to talk about right after the break. If you, like me, love a debate and a real ding-dong debate, make sure you join us tomorrow night because Matt Canavan and Nicholas Rees are here. In the meantime, sit back, use the Queen's English, the King's too, for the Royal Report here on Sky News.